everybody, it's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, been commenting publicly on your Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece, and still waiting for that Super Bowl victory. Heck, we'd be happy if we made it back real soon. We're going to find out. Part of that is some of the things we're going to talk about today. We got in our first theme this week in Vikingsland, we got 3 segments. We're going to talk about the Dalton Risner returning, see if it's like MacArthur back to the Philippines. Then we're going to get into the concerns Darren has over the wide receiver 3 position. Are they valid? They could be. We'll find out. Then we're going to talk about the NFL Players Association's proposal. What's that all about? How can it change our football landscape? We'll find out. And then finally, what the show's named for, will Justin Jefferson's numbers go down? All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikingsland with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey, everybody. We're back once again this week with a ton of stuff to go over. And, of course, there's tons of stuff brewing in the news. You've seen it. You're talking about it in the chat, whether it be possible JJ signing tomorrow, possible Atlanta Falcons get their wrists slapped. We'll find out. If that happens, we'll talk about it next week. But until then, we're going to be talking about, will JJ's numbers fall? But first, Darren, how are things in the Great White North?
Just peachy, Dave. No issues. As you said, there's been pretty somewhat eventful week in the NFL and for the Vikings, which is always good. As OTAs are still going on, and there's been stuff happening. So lots of stuff to talk about, I think.
Yeah, there is. And I want to thank everybody that's joined us so far. I see Davey, I see Giotano, I see the Drewster, I see Selling McCarthyism. Welcome back, my friend. The Doc is in the house, Doc Proto. Who else am I missing? Scrolling up. That looks to be it. That's posted to the chat. And there's Daniel. He just added SKOL, Daniel. Well, with that, let's start off with theme 1. He's back.
Yes, for the second year in a row, Dalton Risner has had to wait a little while to get a NFL contract. And on earlier this week, he re-signed with the Vikings. And that means that all this nice stuff, this stuff that the pumping of the tires on Blake Brandel from West Phillips in particular, where he was saying Blake Brandel he's deserved this chance to start for us. Well, that turned out, I think, just to be at least a bit of hot air from Wes, which is okay by me, because I was not really super confident having Blake Brandel just handed the starting left guard position. So signing Risner provides more depth, more competition for the left guard position, which I think is ultimately a good thing. The fact of the matter is that Dalton Risner is not Ed White. He is not Randall McDaniel. He's kind of been an average starting interior offensive lineman at the NFL level in this 5 seasons. He's got a reputation, and I think based on what I saw last year, pretty solid pass blocker. kind of a subpar run blocker. And as an offensive lineman, Dave, that is run blocking is a pretty major part of your job description. So if you're only good at one of those two things, I don't think that's really ideal. But nonetheless, he's back, and that's fine with me. Like I said, add to the depth, add some competition to the left guard position. Last year, Viking fans, personally, we like Risner. He's a hustler. He works hard. He's very enthusiastic on the field, great in interviews. That's all good. But when last year, at least to me, when he got signed and then eventually replaced Ezra Cleveland as our starting left guard, I didn't think that the Vikings offensive line got noticeably better or even better. So how good of a player is he? Last year, his PFF grades was 57.1, which is the lowest that PFF has given him in his 5 seasons in the NFL. So not fantastic. We'll have to see what his contract numbers are, Dave. I still haven't seen. He signed a 1-year deal.
I haven't seen them either, and I looked yesterday. They weren't out yet.
And that'll, I think, determine whether Risner is right now the presumptive starter in the Vikings' minds or not, because Brandel signed in the offseason, he signed a 3-year deal for 9.5 million, I believe, but only 1.1 of that was guaranteed. So that's not really starter money. Last year, Risner, when he finally did sign with the Vikings, he signed a 1-year deal. It was for 4 million, 2.25 million was guaranteed. So if he signs for something similar or maybe a little bit more than that this time around, that'll be an indication that the Vikings see him as the starter right now. But I do believe that there's going to be a competition here. This is not going to be handed to him. Even though I believe that Wes Phillips was doing what the Vikings coaching staff has shown that they've done since Kevin O'Connell took over here, and that they never say a bad thing about any player. It's all rainbows and confetti and all
unicorns.
Yes. Yeah, unicorns and fairy dust. And that's okay. I understand why they do that. I think most players do not like being disparaged publicly by their coaches. So it all makes sense. But I think that there is a little bit of truth to that. I think that they do value Blake Brandel, or else they wouldn't have brought him back. Do they value or think that he's a starter? I'm not convinced about that. And I think that there is going to be some competition here that, if Risner's contract is kind of is similar to what he made last year, yeah, maybe he's the front runner to be the starter, but I think Brandel is going to get a chance to beat him out. And that Risner is not just going to be handed the starting left guard position because he hasn't played well enough to earn that right, I think. And Dave, you love the O-line, so I know you're going to weigh in here, and I think that you've got a similar but slightly different feeling on how this is all going to shake out.
Yes, and this is a section of notes I did not send Darren because I did not want him cheating. So, as everybody knows, I've said numerous times, it takes 3 to 4 years to develop an offensive lineman. Keep that number in mind. Now, last year we heard numerous times, we've all seen the clip where Dalton comes out and he says, well, I beat out their starting left guard to get the job, and he was traded. Remember that, right? So we'll look at that. Starting left guard last year prior was my boy, Ezra Cleveland. And Drewster in the comments can attest to how much I had a crush on Ezra Cleveland since we drafted him originally.
Big one.
Now, and we drafted him as a tackle. Unfortunately, he was needed as a guard immediately, and they didn't move him from there. They drafted Christian Darrisaw after that, and then there's no need to move him. Mm-hmm. Last year, going into his 4th season, Ezra's games with the Minnesota Vikings, right? His grades with Jacksonville, Carolina, wherever it went.
Jacksonville
dropped after that, but that's understandable. You're going to a brand new system, totally new players, et cetera, et cetera. His grades last year for those 6 games, 73.8 total offense, 72.3 pass blocking. Remember that one, because that's better than we see. And then 72.8 in run blocking. And he was a damn fine run blocker because he can move, right? And for a big man, and by big, he was a tackle, he was outstanding. But Dalton Risner said he beat him out. I don't think that was the reason, Dalton. But we'll go on from there. So Ezra has left. In comes Dalton. Okay? As you remember, what's led to this decision? It could be that Chris Cooper and Dalton were best buds. You know that, hey, buddy, wink, wink. You know,
Shame.
You know, hey, I'm going to play favorites here. You're going to come play. That's one possible reason. Not that that ever happens in the NFL, right? That's one possible reason that could have happened. Why Dalton took over from Ezra. Now, remember, look back at those grades. Those grades would be sweet. Do you know where those grades rank at that point? Those numbers rank amongst all active guards?
I believe there was at the beginning of the season, the Vikings offensive line got a lot of kudos because they're finally an elite, and they're bringing up Bradbury had high grades at that point. Darisaw certainly. O'Neal had his grades were through the roof. Ingram's were coming up to like almost a solid league average level.
Come up, yeah.
And I believe Ezra's was like top 10 in the NFL.
At that point in time, if he would have finished the season with those grades, he would have been 13th overall, 12th in pass blocking, and 13th for run blocking at 20% starts. That's amazing. That's by far. We haven't had a guard that good in a long, long time. But no, we traded him away, which leads to the other possible reason. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. What was the reason for the trade? Was it Chris Cooper's, best bud that we took Dalton? Or was it because Dalton was cheaper, knowing that Kwesi's going to have to re-sign Ezra Cleveland, and Ezra Cleveland's going to have to make starting guard money, the money that Dalton Risner has been complaining that he wanted, right? And Ezra got an extension, $14 million per. That's starting guard money. That happened. So, is that a possibility that Kwesi wanted a draft pick and to save some cap? Possibly. I don't know the answers to these questions. I don't know why they went with the trade and went with Dalton Risner. And we've already seen Dalton's grades. Right? They're right there. And you said it, 57.1 overall. His pass blocking grade's pretty good. The run blocking grade is atrocious. Well, one of the things that the front office has said all this offseason is they want to improve the run game. We need to make the run game more efficient. We need to get more out of it so we can set up the pass game, of course. But they need to have a more efficient run game. So we went out and got Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones should be a better runner than what we've had, and go out there in combination with Ty Chandler, go out there and get greater production, right? And that sets up the pass, and the offense hums even more. Well, for the run to work, you need good run blockers as well.
Imagine that.
And Dalton, in my opinion, is horrible. So, Cleveland's fourth year was notable, obviously. Dalton's Last year was Dalton's 5th year in the league. Now he's going into his 6th. Well, let's look at the other side of the line, because why not? Let's look at all the guards we had last year. Everybody talks about Ed Ingram. Ed Ingram is so bad. Ed Ingram, we got to replace Ed Ingram. Well, maybe Dalton can go to the right side. Ed Ingram is bad. Oh, my God, Ed Ingram is bad. There's Ed Ingram's grades. 60 per PFF is average. When I looked at the averages, and I'll show a slide here, for guard play, it's slightly higher than that, but not a whole lot. Ed's going into his 3rd year. Remember what I say about it takes 3 or 4 years for a player to develop and get it in the offensive line position for most players. If you have one that you draft early, Christian Darrisaw, that's amazing that you can do that. Or Penei Sewell for Detroit. Or pick your, stud O-linemen that do it early. That's unusual in this league because that quality coming out of college isn't there. They've got to make the transition from college to pro ball, and it's so different. And I've gone on about it. They need camps, they need stuff, and they're just starting to get those going. Now, Drew says Ingram is set to have a dominant season. I believe you, Drew. I think there was pretty much steady improvement last year. The only game he got smoked in was that last game against Green Bay, which most of them did. But that's an absolute
well in that game for the Vikings.
And but if you throw out that anomaly, his grade goes up even higher. So, and that's at pass blocking, and he's better at run blocking. So I think we're going to be happy with the 3rd-year development of Ed Ingram. But I wanted to cover everybody that played. So that brings us to my overall slide.
Ooh.
Where I compare all 4 of them, Ezra, Ed, Blake, and Dalton Risner. Now, Blake, I've talked about years. Blake is going into his 4th year. Ed's going into his 3rd. Ezra last year was at his 4th year. Dalton's going into his 6th. He should have it by now.
Mm-hmm.
The average guard numbers for each of those positions, and I sorted it and looked at the average of the 33rd guard. 64 guards starting in the NFL. So I went, half would be 32 and a half. I went 33. 30 position and looked, and those are the numbers. That is your median for a starting guard. That should be the goal for every guard or better on this team. Whether it be Dalton Risner, whether it be Blake Brandel, whether it be Ed Ingram, or any of the rookies that we signed this year, that should be the target. Actually, I would say that's the minimum they should be. Now, again, I think I go to the year point. Blake Brandel he's a jack of all trades, could play every position on the line. He took snaps last year, didn't play as a center, but he took snaps. He can go just about anywhere, but I think they believe he's best utilized starting at one position and staying at that one position right now, and that is left guard. We shall see if that is the correct decision. And if in his 4th year, he steps up beyond that bare minimum. I think he will. Do I believe Dalton Risner will? No. I think what we have with Dalton Risner is what we have. And last year for Dalton Risner was his worst grades of his career. So I believe they are going to stick with Blake Brandel as the stated starter, and Dalton Risner has to fight to get that starting position back. And he may not. He may be perfectly suited to be depth. And I'm cool with that. Let him be depth. From what I gather in his contract, is full of incentives, right? Which tells me it's probably pretty much bare bones minimums and then incentives. Well, he's got to earn those. Well, obviously he didn't do enough last year because he can't run block. And the one thing that Kevin O'Connell wants to do this year is run. That's weird to say, but he does. Why? Because it helps the pass. So, I'm in full belief that your starting left guard this season, week 1, is going to be Blake Brandel, and Dalton Risner is going to be riding the pine as quality backup. And that's it. That's my opinion. But Darren has a different one. You may have a different one. If you do, put it in the chat. But
Roscoe Pico train already
he
did.
says Risner's better than Brandel. We're going to find out there, buddy. You can look at the numbers. Last year's numbers, Blake Brandel was at right guard. Just if you're curious. It wasn't at tackle like in previous years. That was at right guard when Ed got injured. So we'll find out.
Yeah, I think just maybe a final thing for me on this. And when you were talking earlier about like why did the Vikings, particularly the Vikings, Chris Cooper, the Vikings coaching staff, decide to trade Ezra Cleveland away after his grades were really, really good. Now the Vikings have they would have their own evaluation and grades on how those guys are doing. But I think one of the reasons might be is because
they do get PFFs.
Yes,
all 32 teams do.
But one of the reasons might be that I talked earlier about how Risner's like you see him after plays. He's the first guy to go to a running back, a wide receiver, or a quarterback who's been pushed down and grab him by under his armpits and pick him up. He do that kind of drop kick thing at the end of big plays last year. Always hustling, always like after a play going. Following up the play, he'd be the first offensive lineman downfield on all those kinds of plays. He's a guy who's very energetic, and I think that maybe that's kind of partly what the Vikings, they like that attitude. Whereas Cleveland was always kind of a passive, not a physical guy, finesse, very mobile, but maybe he just didn't have like the personality that they want to see in their offensive lineman, which is like, I'm going to kick this guy across from me in the nuts. And after I do it one more time, or after I do it once, I'm going to do it 3 more times after that. That's kind of what a lot of offensive lineman coaches may like from there. They want like mean, nasty dudes up front.
And that may be the case because one deal about Ezra is shy, when it comes to personality. You don't see it on the field as much. Heck, even Christian Darrisaw sort of is, but I mean, he abuses people when he gets out there, and that's what we want to see. Now, Ezra hit hard, and he pancaked people, and he played well at times, but he didn't have that rah, type stuff. And you may be right. That may be it. I have no idea. Roscoe talks it's Risner's energy, attitude, fortitude, etc. are off the charts, just not his run blocking capability. That's the one thing that's different, Roscoe. So anyways, that's my take. I think Blake is starting. Risner will be quality depth.
And one of these guys, Dave, Drew talked about how Ed Ingram is due for a big standout year. And that if that happens, that's going to be big because I never played the game, not an offensive lineman, and you can chime in, Dave, on this, and I'm sure you will. But the interior is the part of the offensive line we always complain about. Bradbury's at league average. Ed Ingram's been worse than league average, and Ezra Cleveland, we weren't always impressed with him, although you were. But I think if you could get, and Cleveland played like that last year, but I think if you could just get one guy on the interior, one out of those 3 to be above league average or very good, I think that would make a big difference in our defense, on our offensive line in general, and how we play, and prevent some of that push up the middle that always seems to get into our quarterback's face and create a lot of problems. But we always seem to have three average guys or less than average guys in the interior. Our tackles are fine, no worries there. But the three guys in the middle, that's where all the
been a problem for years. Yes, I agree. That's, you want to get better, which leads me to the one last thing, and we'll move on to the next topic. Dalton Risner was brought in a pass block for this very statuesque Kirk Cousins. The quarterbacks that we're going to have start this year, be it Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, are not statues. They're able to move and manipulate the pocket. I think that benefits whoever's playing quarterback, but I think Blake is going to benefit from that a little bit more, but he's got to work on it. So when it comes to pass blocking, but we'll find out. We'll find out. And I do love everybody in the chat going over this. This is awesome. All right, that brings us to our next segment.
Some Conrad Dobler down there in the comments.
You have wide receiver concerns. Why
I do.
That?
Yeah, well, right now, I've stated this during the off season that I'm not really too jazzed about what we have as for options for wide receiver number 3, which in today's NFL is a very important position. You're basically a number 3 wide receiver is a starting wide receiver with the amount of how much passing there is in the NFL these days. And that especially includes the Vikings, who under KOC have thrown the ball almost more than anybody else in the NFL since Kevin O'Connell's been the head coach. So pretty important position. And I've got concerns about what we have there, because right now, the top 3 options to be wide receiver number 3 this year are Brandon Powell, journeyman Trent Sherfield, or third-year guy Jalen Nailor. And those are the options. Now, there's some other lower-level guys that I'm not even going to mention because I don't really think they're going to be in the picture, whether it's Tristan Jackson, Thayer Thomas, and all those kind of guys. But those are the top 3 right now. And the Vikings the previous 3 seasons, the Vikings have had, I think, pretty consistent production from the wide receiver 3, who was KJ Osborne. The Vikings decided this year not to re-sign KJ, but in his 3 years with the Vikings, he had between 48 and 60 catches in those 3 years, was over 600 yards receiving yards in 2 of those 3. He was a little bit below that last year. But he's with the New England Patriots now. He's not with the Vikings. So question is, who is going to be taking over for him? And the 3 that I've mentioned, I have concerns because looking at their track record, Brandon Powell, 76 career catches. Career best is 29 catches in a single season. That happened last year. Trent Sherfield, 78 career catches in 6 NFL seasons. His best was in a single season was 30 catches. And then Jalen Nailor, he's got 12 career catches in 2 seasons, and he was mostly injured last year. So that's not a whole lot of great track record there that you're looking at. And I think you need a wide receiver who is going to be productive and going to be able to get open. And I just don't know if those guys, as is, are can do that for us now. And if you're looking at Powell, Sherfield, and Nailor, and the production they've had during a season. Last year, when Powell was our number 3 guy after Justin Jefferson got hurt with the hamstring injury in the Kansas City game, he played reasonably well as a number 3 guy, but he never had more than 4 catches in a game. He never had more than 64 receiving yards in a game. You look at Sherfield, I think the most catches he's had in a single game was 6. 77 yards is his best receiving yardage in a single game. That happened in 2018, his rookie year. And then Jalen Nailor, well, he's I don't really have any production context to provide to him because he just hasn't really played enough. So we don't really know what we have with him. But
he looks good, and then he turns up injured.
Yes. Then he turns up injured. Right now, I think the consensus is that Brandon Powell is going to be your wide receiver number 3. And again, he looked reasonably solid as the number 3 wide receiver in the 7 games that he was. He was in the starting rotation while Jefferson was out. But if he only averaged, again, these are averages, but he only averaged like just under 3 catches a game and about 34 yards per game during that stretch. But if you extrapolate that over a full 17 game season, that does work out to about 48 catches and 538 yards, which is basically what KJ Osborne did last year. So maybe I'm making too much about this, Dave, and my concerns, because one thing is that with the Vikings, when you're looking at who they've got, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson when he gets back, and then the Vikings, of course, added Aaron Jones, who's always been an excellent pass catcher out of the backfield. If those guys are playing full-time all the time, the reality is that whether it's Powell or Sherfield or Nailor, they're going to be the 5th receiving option on the field every play. So how many balls are they going to realistically get thrown to them anyway? That's one thing. And I think the other thing is that the Vikings, you talked about it earlier, last year our running game really struggled. That was an issue. With the way the quarterback, KOC, wants to run more this year, he wants to be more effective and more efficient in the running game. And I think he looks at that because with our quarterback position the way it is now, whether you either got Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, and Darnold as a pro quarterback, what he's done is not something that really gives you a lot of confidence. And J.J. McCarthy has yet to throw a pass in an NFL game, whether it's preseason or regular season. Well, KLC, it makes sense that he wants to run the ball more. So the Vikings might run more 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, only 2 wide receivers than they have in the previous 2 years with Kevin O'Connell, which again is going to mean less balls that are going to be heading the way to whoever's playing wide receiver number 3. And also you're not going to need the wide receiver number 3 so much. So you don't need a big stud at wide receiver number 3 if they're your 5th receiving option. So again, I've got concerns, but the Vikings could be structuring their offense in a way that those concerns aren't such a big deal in the grand scheme of things in 2024. But looking at those 3 guys as your top 3, I would, it still worries me. Maybe the Vikings are going to bring in a veteran. The name Hunter Renfrow has been tossed around a few times in the press, but again, that's not something we've heard from the Vikings. We've just heard that, hey, Hunter Renfrow is a free agent. It sure makes sense if he could, for him to go to Minnesota because they've got this question mark at wide receiver number 3. But we don't know if the Vikings have any interest in Hunter Renfrow, considering Renfrow had a key fumble when we played the Las Vegas Raiders last year. That was a key to us winning that game. They might not think as much of Renfrow as some other people do.
You're possibly right on that one. I agree with you. I'm not so much worried about the wide receiver 3 position because it is, like you said, we've got other weapons. I think Aaron Jones is going to get more balls thrown his way. We know the tight ends will, whoever's in there, whether it be Oliver, whether it be
Onion or Johnny Monsoon.
Yeah, they're going to get some passes thrown their way. And of course, once TJ gets back, then it's going to be balls to the walls. But
yeah,
I sort of see if we're rotating all 3 of those guys, if one gets hot, keep with the hot hand. If not, keep rotating him through. Keep him fresh. Keep him, and a wide receiver 3 by definition stays fresh because he's not out there every single play. So I think it'd be fine.
It's going to have to be, and I've said before that I hope Nailor is the guy who can take this job and run with it and take it away from Powell because he has shown in brief stints that he's got that juice. He's fast. He seems to have a way of getting open, but health has been the issue for him at college, and it's been an issue for him at the pro level now. And it's really stunted his, particularly it stunted his growth a lot last year with the amount of time he was out. He just never found a groove in the short time that he got back, and he didn't have a role with the team by the time that he got back last year.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Selling McCarthyism when it comes to McCarthy being QB3, I saw that tweet, report, whatever. Till I hear it from the team going into week 1, I'm not worried at all. We'll see in training camp that he moves above. I'm not at all worried. Well, that moves us to the next segment of what's happening in Vikingsland. This one, the NFL Players Association, the proposal.
Yeah, so this isn't just this is a league-wide issue, Dave, not strictly a Vikings issue, but of course it impacts the Vikings as much as every other NFL team, and it's a pretty significant development. So I did want to talk about it. The NFL's proposal to dramatically alter how the NFL offseason training, team training works for players. And to recap for our viewers, kind of in Cole's notes, how this works right now is, if you're a little bit fuzzy on, is that the players report for off-season workouts in mid-April, basically, and it's a voluntary 9-week program that's kind of broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 includes meetings. You got phase 2, which is on-field individual drills, and then you get into organized team activities for phase 3. And then teams can also conduct one mandatory mini camp for veterans during phase 3. And then after phase 3, the players break away, and they have kind of basically a 6-week summer break around mid-June until training camp kicks off in mid to late July. Well, under the NFL's proposal, NFLPA's proposal, those voluntary workouts are going to be conducted, that are conducted throughout the spring now, are going to end or would end. And instead, you'd be replaced with a gradual ramp up to training camp that would start in June or maybe early July, but likely June. And it's worth noting that under this proposal that the teams would be allowed to hold virtual meetings with the players during the spring at least. So, this is pretty significant. And if and
they're talking even in classroom stuff.
Mm-hmm. It would be. And why is the NFLPA putting this out? They say they're doing it because for players' health reasons. They've consulted medical experts on this. With the way the off-season workout program is structured right now. And what they've been told is that the way it's structured now, it's leading to a lot of these soft tissue injuries, strains and sprains to muscles, tendons, and ligaments. And they feel that structuring it this way with this, ending the spring stuff and doing a gradual ramp up in June to July would potentially eliminate some of those kind of injuries. And of course, anything new like this, changing what we have currently in place, there's going to be people who are for it and people who are against it. And this week, Albert Breer said himself, he said, "I hate it. And I know that lots of coaches, or not lots, but I know that there's coaches and front office types that hate it as well." One of the interesting points, criticisms of this, is that family time, and that if you players that have young kids might not really like this very much, because they are if you're ending, instead of right now you basically have school ends in late June most of the time for almost everybody. With the way things are structured,
further south and sooner. School's out here already.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
So with that, and if you're done your OTAs by early June and you don't do anything, you don't go back with the team until late July, well, that gives you 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks where you've got, to be with your family before you get into training camp. And then it's football 24/7 for the next 6 months. So the criticism is that this workout, the players who have families, and there are a lot of them that do, are not going to be really keen about this, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. Now, on the other hand,
they don't care about their own health.
But of course, there's people who there's been criticisms for quite a while about the current NFL offseason workout program. We've heard players complain about it, including the GOAT, Tom Brady, where this structure where you got the OTAs that come in and stops and starts. You're going for a couple of weeks, then you're not, then you go again, then you don't do anything for 5 or 6 weeks, and then you start training camp in late July. Tom Brady feels, and other people have felt that has led to a poorer execution, sloppy play at the start of the NFL season, and a poorer product that the NFL is putting out than it did 20 years ago when the off-season workout was different, which is an interesting point of view. And it does, I think there makes some sense because this new off-season program, if you look at, okay, we're not doing very much in April except virtual meetings, classroom stuff. But then when we do get going in mid-June or whatever, we're going to be going straight through for 10 weeks until we get to the preseason and the cuts and the NFL season. Well, that 10 weeks of continuous, you've got the team together, you're working on stuff together, you're not working on it for 2 weeks and then gone for 2 or 3 and then starting up again. The argument is that's going to lead to a sharper teams. It's going to allow them to gradually ramp up the conditioning, which might reduce some of these soft tissue injuries. And you're just going to have a sharper, more in tune, more fine-tuned NFL teams to start in regular season game number 1 than what we're seeing currently. And so this is something that I think the drastic changes is really something that is going to be interesting to track and see where this goes, because we don't know if the owners are going to go for it or not. But as it was brought up in the chat below, this could be a way to convince the players to go to the 18-game regular season.
All right. The NFL Player Association is under new leadership, and this is the new leadership. They do have data that shows a slow, steady ramp up saves injuries to the tune like 700 a season. And you got to remember, there's thousands of injuries a year. If you can save a good chunk of it, and both sides are saying we're all for players' health and safety, right? Both the players' union and the league have said that publicly. Now, whether they believe that or not, they say it publicly, and they at least give it lip service. And the NFL as a league has to, because if not, they'll be brought into Congress and court and possibly lose their special statuses and all that sort of stuff. So, and I do believe Ruby's joined us. Hello, Ruby. And so everybody says, hey, if this actually is going to work and help with fewer injuries and players are better, then we should probably do it. But it's going to be interesting how it affects the league calendar. Now, we know the league wants an 18-game season. That we do. They've already said it. It's coming. It's coming no matter what. We're eventually going to get it. Probably the time is the next time the players' agreement is up for renewal. One of the things that the players want is this new schedule. It's to have, if you look, and I've got the months up there. I wish I'd done graphics where I drew lines so you could see timelines. If you take an 18-week schedule that starts in September, add a second bye, it's going to end, Super Bowl is going to be mid-February. So it's going to be a little bit longer on that end. Now, you may only have 2 preseason games. That's fine. But it's going to be mid-February. What happens after mid-February? Well, the beginning of March, around that time period, that first week of March, when the new league year starts, we get free agency. So you go from the Super Bowl, 2 weeks of talk from the Super Bowl into free agency. Now, all the teams that didn't make the Super Bowl and have lost, they're already looking at free agents and they're looking at the college prospects. They're all going, balls to walls with that. So they're looking at all that stuff. Then we have, free agency start. We go into the first phase of that, and then the second phase, as we're building up to the combine. Then we get the combine, and we go through that, and we're looking at players and all that sort of stuff. Well, all the vets are off. At this point in time, they're done. They're sitting there. That's when they go on their vacations. They are done. You always hear, hey, tea time in Cancun, set up. Be there Saturday, right? And they all meet down in Cancun, Mexico to play golf and get drunk. That sort of stuff happens now. It's not going to stop happening, but they're not going to be involved until, we get to April, May, we have the draft and all that sort of stuff. And after the draft's going to work the same way. You're going to, right afterwards, you're going to have a week where you got to bring in all those rookies. You've got to get them in process, check their sizes, fit them for helmets and shoes and uniforms and all that stuff. And you get to promo stuff, and you talk about how great this kid is from Podunk U that we found out of nowhere, and he's ginormous, and he can run a 4.240, and all this sort of stuff happens then. Well, what happens now is all that stuff happens, but then you immediately go into a rookie minicamp. And you've already had an OTA prior to even the draft where you had just vets only. Then you go into a rookie minicamp, right, where you bring them in and 3 days of, here's the facility, here's this is the procedures we go through, here's all this stuff. Well, that could be done then that week afterwards when you bring them all in the first place. And you're doing your medicals and you're showing them where the cool room is and all the stuff that, happens in a normal locker room. You can do that. That's normal. It's going to take place anyways. Just not call it a organized team activity. The vets are they can still be in Cancun fishing or golfing or whatever they're doing. They're having that good old time. Now, the coaches in the front office are balls to the walls all the way up through this time period. So they're working. And then there's the break between what is basically right now, we're at the beginning of June. Right now, between now and what would be probably a couple weeks from now before the OTAs start. Right now, we've already gone through 6 OTAs already.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Plus the rookies. Those wouldn't have taken place. You can still have your in-meeting teleconference styles. You can teach the classes they were talking about is in financial literacy, understanding the NFL rules. You can start
gambling.
Gambling, all that, driving 100 and whatever down I-94. All that stuff can take place. And you can bring in the rookies. I'd bring in the rookies. The vets, it could be optional that hey, I'm zooming in or however it is. And you can start doing that. And it's real simple. You go through this stuff and it could be a few days a week. Hey, we're going over the first 3 chapters in the playbook. All right. We have a test on Tuesday or whatever it is, however they want to do that. And they can do it book-wise. And nobody at that point in time is doing anything physical. Now, they could come into the building and they could lift weights. A lot of them do already because then if they get injured, it's covered, right? Because it's a team facility. That's the one thing the players can do. They can work out at a team facility because there's team people there to monitor and make sure they don't do stupid shit and hurt themselves. And if they do hurt themselves, they're there to respond. But there's other players that say, no, I want to train in Florida. Well, those players can train in Florida. Justin Jefferson, whoever. That still doesn't change.
Laughing at Drew's comment.
Yeah, I saw it too. It's funny. Yeah. But you can get a lot of this. Let's get all this mental stuff out first. Let's get all the familiarization stuff out of the way. It's all nice and easy. It's more relaxed. It's a relaxed setting. you're not running, on 7-on-7 drills trying to beat the other guy out for the position because there are none of those drills yet. And then you get into mid-June, and it's got to be, I'm guessing it's got to be mid-June. And you start the OTA style stuff where it's just shorts, shorts and a t-shirt. And you're starting to do the installs and the walkthroughs and this stuff. And you maybe, if you're a lineman, hitting the blocking sled with your hands, working on techniques and the stuff we're seeing now. And you could do that, but you're not putting a massive strain on your body, but you're slowly building it up. And then we get into the training camp portion, which usually starts in late July or 1st of August. It's generally been the whole month of August where the pads come on. And then you're cranking up. But there's no breaks, no large breaks in between. Now, may they put one in between just for, hey, here's your last week before we go balls to walls for the next 6 months? Maybe. It's all in how they negotiate it. But it's not little bits here and little bits there and little bits here. It's more steady. And you're building yourself up in a better football shape. Training camps used to be, a couple months long.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just a month. So this sort of takes, and they've gotten, it used to be 2 months with 2-a-days and full padded. Now this takes that basically, and it makes it sort of that 2-month camp, maybe 2.5, but you're training up from shorts.
Yeah.
And you're slowly building up and you're getting into football shape. And I mean, these players are in shape no matter what, but football shape's a little bit different. And then you get into that. And then if you get to that point, you're rolling into the season week 1. And I think we will have a more cohesive, even with only 2 preseason games, week 1, the teams will be playing better than what they currently are now, where week 1 is basically looks like exhibition week for the starters, right? Because week 1 is screwy and nobody seems to be in shape and they're tired by the third quarter and all that sort of stuff. So we'll see if this works out. I think they're going to do it because 1, players want something in that new contract, right? 2, the league wants that 18th game in the new contract. This is that, I'll give it to you type of deal. Now, you talked about how the staffs are a little upset because they usually, July is the time we take for go on family vacation. And if we have to move, it's the time we move. That's nice. But does the NFL care more about its product or keeping some of these people happy?
The former.
And, most people work year round.
Yeah.
Get maybe 2-3 weeks of vacation a year, right? If you're lucky, you'll get 4. If you've been in the business for 20 years, you may get 4, right? This isn't Europe where you get months off and it's all paid. No. So
8 weeks, baby. 8 weeks paid vacation.
That's crazy. And so you got to move. And if you got to move during the school year, you move during the school year. That's what happens to normal people here down in the States. Mm-hmm. I grew up, my mom was, after my folks got divorced, she worked for IBM. I had to move during the middle of my 4th grade year, and then I had later moved in the middle of my 7th grade year.
You must have been happy with your mom.
Kids didn't have a choice. You moved. Were you upset you're leaving your friends? Sure. But you learn to make new friends. And in being in the military, orders can come at any time. Guess what? You move. You don't have a choice. You go. And that's what you chose to do. So I don't have the sympathy. I understand the quality of life, and I want to keep my people happy through quality of life. But there's sometimes when, sorry, for the betterment of the Vikings or the betterment of the league, we've got to change. And I think that's what's going to happen here is that they will change. Now, another effect is on contracts. Right now, contracts have a lot of workout bonuses and things like that in those. They'll have to go, and that'll have to be compensated for. Those will have to be, well, that's guaranteed. You made the workouts because it's mandatory. We see you here, you're here, right? It's not going to be an optional thing at that point. But we'll find out.
Drew was asking below if the NFL goes to 18 games, does the NFL roster size change? I don't think it will, because is there a big difference between 17 now, which they haven't changed the roster size, to 18? That's only one more game.
But they've changed some of the roster rules.
Yeah, I think that's what you'd be looking at. They might change how the injured reserve works and how long guys can be on it, or how big your practice squad is, or I don't know how that sort of thing works. I think would be, you could see little changes in making, I think, the roster more flexible, so it's easier to bring in guys, take out guys, and somehow not be penalized by them. But I don't think you're going to see them go from like the 53 to the 73, something along those lines.
Well, that's one thing that's been talked about. I don't know. Drew may be right. I've heard rumblings of that they want to increase roster size to, Giotano says 58 or 60 versus a 53, final 53. If they would have to do that, would be interesting, because then you're getting into cap splits. Because the more people you have on the roster, the more that cap is divided.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the cap is divided by your 53, top 53. And then you start adding your practice squad and all that stuff. Now, if you go, say, 60, does that 60 come from your practice squad pot or however total? Maybe. Could be. I don't know. Yeah. We'll find out. Yeah, Giotano, it's a negotiation. And players, it's the first time in a long time Players Association has been the one to initiate something. So I got to give them that. Mm-hmm. So that is the end of this week's in Vikingsland of Theme 1. And now we're off to Theme 2. And there's only 2 today, so don't worry, folks.
We'd be here till midnight if we had 3 themes, the way things have been going.
You got that right. The one the show is named after. You're worried about Justin Jefferson's production going down.
I was, because one of my favorite things to do is watch Justin Jefferson go to work.
I'm starring that one for the show. Remark of the show.
Is watching him go to work, because he has been, in his 4 seasons in the NFL, he has been off the charts good. And when you get, it's not often you get to watch your favorite team have an all-timer in the lineup. And that is what we have had with Justin Jefferson so far, is doing things that no wide receiver in the NFL history has ever done, as far as catches, yardage, all that shebang. And so when you get that, you gotta cherish it. You got to enjoy it. And I do. Like, one of my favorite things is like, if Vikings win, I'm really happy, but I'm even happier if Vikings win. And JJ had 10 catches for 200 yards and 2 TDs. And like, he's just my favorite player. So
he's grittying all over the field.
Yeah.
People are, we're getting videos from schools, children's doing the gritty and all that stuff. Yes, absolutely.
But with the Vikings change in quarterback approach, out with Kirk Cousins, in with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, that's going to change the offense. It's going to change how the Vikings pass the ball. It might change how effective they are passing the ball, which is going to impact potentially Justin Jefferson's numbers. When Kirk Cousins was a quarterback, there was a chemistry there. There was a trust there, and Cousins is a pretty, good quarterback. So Justin Jefferson, being who he was with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, a veteran who knows what he's doing, can get the ball where it needs to go. You knew that Justin Jefferson was going to have monster numbers every year that Kirk Cousins is in there. Well, he doesn't have Kirk Cousins anymore. He's got Sam Darnold and or JJ McCarthy. And my feeling was that we might have to get used to seeing JJ not have 100 catches in a season, over 1,800 yards in a season if Sam Darnold is throwing in the ball in 2024. But I did want to, but I thought, yeah. But I thought, why not take a look at some recent examples of stud wide receivers who have had a significant change in who their quarterback is from one season to the next, and see how they did. And so I looked at three guys, recent notable examples. Davante Adams, from who in 2022 got traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm also going to look at Tyreek Hill and Adam Thielen. But right now, we're looking at Davante Adams. So in 2021, he had Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, one of the best to ever done it. His stats were pretty great. 123 catches, over 1,500 yards, 11 TDs. Well, in 2022, he goes from catching passes from Aaron Rodgers to catching them from Derek Carr. That is a downgrade at quarterback. Even though Carr is a solid veteran, he's a good quarterback, but he ain't Aaron Rodgers. So how did that impact Davante Adams' production? Not a whole lot. His catches went down a fair bit, 100 catches to 123 in 2022, but he still had over 1,500 yards receiving, and he had 14 TDs, which was more than he had the previous year under Rodgers. Now, last year was he had a change in quarterbacks again, Davante Adams, where he went from Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo, and then after Garoppolo got benched, he had rookie Aiden O'Connell as his quarterback. Now, that's a big, big downgrade compared to Aaron Rodgers. How did Davante Adams do? 100 catches again. His yardage went down. He had just 1,144 yards, 8 TDs. But he's still not as fat in production as the previous 2 years, but still pretty damn good. So Davante Adams, even though he had a significant change in who was thrown in the passes, was still very productive in the past 2 years with Las Vegas Raiders. So that's one example. Second example, Tyreek Hill. He goes in 2022, he got traded to the Dolphins from Kansas City. So he goes from Pat Mahomes, the best player in the league, to Tua Tagovailoa. Now, we know what Tagovailoa as a quarterback is right now, but in 2022, when Hill went over there, he was coming off a second year, which was okay, but wasn't really fantastic by any stretch. So there was a big question. He's definitely a downgrade from Mahomes even now, but back then that was even a bigger downgrade for Hill to go to. So how did Hill do in those 2 years? Well, in 2021 with Mahomes, Hill caught 111 passes. That's quite nice. 1,200 yards and 9 TDs, which are very good numbers. But then the next year, with Tua Tagovailoa as his quarterback in 2022, Tyreek Hill caught 119 passes, which is a career high, over 1,700 yards, and his TDs went down a little to 7, but still really, really good numbers, even though he had a significant change in quarterback, going from, again, the best player in the NFL to Tua Tagovailoa, who people weren't too sure about what kind of quarterback he was going to be at that point in time. Okay. Third example, Adam Thielen. We all know Adam very well. We know that he got let go last year. The Vikings chose not to re-sign him, so he moved on to Carolina. So he goes from Kirk Cousins to the first overall pick in the NFL, Bryce Young. Young was very highly thought of when he was picked. That's why he was picked number 1 overall. But last year, maybe not all his fault, but he was still going to be a rookie. He was still going to be a downgrade, I think, to Cousins, and that proved to be the case in 2023 because he really, really, really struggled in Carolina. So you would think that Thielen would also struggle, but actually Thielen thrived in Carolina. 103 catches last year, just over 1,000 yards, 1,014 yards, 4 TDs, which is quite low for him, but still. That is the 100 catches. That's only the second time that Thielen has had 100 catches. The last time was 2018, and that the 1,000-yard receiving yard season Adam Thielen had last year in Carolina with Bryce Young throwing the ball. That was the first time he'd been over 1,000 yards since that 2018 season. It's fair to point out that Thielen was targeted a lot more than he had been the previous couple of years in Minnesota. He was targeted 30 more times in Carolina than the previous year with the Vikings, but still Thielen was very, very productive at Carolina last year on an offense that really had nothing going
and
for
I
it.
was happy to see it because I thought, Adam Thielen's aged. He's up there. He's in his 30s. And
Yeah.
the fact that he could pull off a 1,000-yard season was outstanding. And with a rookie quarterback that, was having all sorts of issues.
And
he had a great season.
He
and
did.
It adds to the legacy of Adam Thielen.
It sure does. And I didn't mention in his 2022 stats with the Vikings with Kirk Cousins throwing the ball, but he had 70 catches in 2022, 716 yards, 6 TDs. Again, didn't get the ball thrown to him nearly as much as he did in Carolina, but those were his numbers, quite a bit below what he did in Carolina last year. Even though he had Bryce Young throwing the ball 16 of the 17 regular season games that Thielen played. The other game, the Red Rocket Andy Dalton was the one throwing them the passes, but those are 3 examples. So that kind of gets to Justin Jefferson and my concerns about, how's he going to do with Sam Darnold throwing in the ball or JJ McCarthy throwing in the ball? And it makes me feel better, Dave, looking at these past examples. Even if you look at, the fact is that Justin Jefferson is so good. I think that it's made me realize this little exercise that pretty much, unless Spurgeon Wynn is your quarterback, Justin Jefferson is probably going to be very, very good and very, very productive and catching 100 passes and well over 1,000 yards, no matter who is thrown in the ball. And that includes Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy next year. You just look at what he did with Nick Mullins as the quarterback last year in the 4 games that Mullins was the starter at the end of the season after he took over from Josh Dobbs. Well, JJ averaged 7.5 catches and 119 yards per game with Nick Mullins as his quarterback. You take that over a full 17-game season, that's 127 catches and over 2,000 yards, which would be an NFL record. So, Jefferson with Nick Mullins was extremely, extremely productive. And, again, this makes me feel a lot better. I think, Jefferson is so good that I think he's going to make his quarterback better. Just like Devontae Adams has made quarterbacks better when he's played with them. And just like Tyreek Hill, he's clearly made Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami offense better because he's just on the field and he's so good. And I think that Justin Jefferson is really he's going to help Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, who was ever quarterbacking the Vikings. He's going to help them be the best quarterback they can be. And he's going to help the Vikings offense be still very effective, even if we don't, even if we don't quite get the same kind of quarterback play we've seen the previous 5 years under Kirk Cousins. But those are the things that I think that this exercise has taught me, and it's made me just it's made me not worry so much about Justin Jefferson and not worry so much about
you don't need stress at your age.
Yeah, that's right. And it also made me feel better about what the Vikings offense will be able to accomplish in 2024. Even though our quarterback situation is going to be, a fair bit different than what it's been the previous 5 years.
It's going to be interesting. But I think JJ is going to thrive anywhere, anytime, with anybody throwing him the football. And I think whether it be Sam Darnold, that means Sam Darnold's playing well, just beyond the early part of the season, or it's JJ McCarthy. I can't wait to see those two marry up. So it's going to be a fun time to watch JJ be JJ. And don't forget, Jordan Addison is right behind him and improving as well. So we've got 2 very good wide receivers. JJ is obviously one of them. I don't expect his numbers to go down whatsoever. He can't be defended. They're already throwing double and triple teams at him.
It's true.
So they're not going to throw half the defense at him. If they do, Aaron Jones is going to have a big day. So, but I'm glad you brought that up because it does alleviate a little bit of stress that, people wondering, oh no, new quarterback, he's not going to be as good. He's not going to slow down. And there's proof. There's evidence that others haven't. So good for him. We'll find out. And if tomorrow, if Mike Florio is right. Now, the key word of that message was possibly, and he gets his extension tomorrow. We'll be celebrating like all get out, and so will he. So it'll be a good day.
Most of us will. There will still be people who will be saying, you can
too much money.
Too much money. We should have traded them. How can we afford it? You can bet $100 that that's going to happen.
Yep. But we'll find out. And we have mandatory minicamp this week. So it should be in the building. Whether he's practicing or not, that's a different story, but he should be in the building. He's already in town. We already know that. So it should be a good time. We should have fun. It's going to be a fun week. Everybody get your beer ready, get your popcorn, and let's see what happens in Vikingsland this week. So, any last words, everybody?
I just, regarding the Justin Jefferson potential extension that Florio saying possibly could happen. We were talking about it offline, but I do hope that this gets resolved. This week would be great. Just because I'd like to get this off as a talking point for the team, for the press, for everybody. And then there's no BS about, is Justin Jefferson going to be a Viking, in the foreseeable future. We get that all settled out of the way. And it also allows the Vikings to financially plan for other signings and years down to come, which they're already doing. But once you've got a big contract like that solidified and the numbers are in place, I think that really allows you more certainty to say, okay, what are we going to do with Christian Darrisaw? Can we re-sign so-and-so? That sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Oh, Ruby, I know what you want me to say.
Well, first, Peter, I suspect 35. It depends on the years. The more years, the higher the cost. We'll find out. Less years, lower the cost. We'll find out. If he wants, $400 million for 10, I'd sign. I saw somebody put that up there. 7 years guaranteed. I'll worry about the guarantees, but the $400 million for 10 years. Retire a Viking. Mm-hmm. But we'll find out. What is it that Ruby wants you to say? Eh?
We'll get into it in a second, I think.
All right, everybody. What do we say, Darren?
We say SKOL Vikings, eh?
SKOL Vikings. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!